I used to think waking up at 5 in the morning was punishment reserved for people who either had no choice or had lost their mind. Then I met a CEO who ran 3 companies, mentored a dozen entrepreneurs, maintained a marriage that actually worked, and still found time to read philosophy before most people even checked their first notification. When I asked him how he did it, he didn't give me some productivity hack or time management system. He said something that stopped me cold. I don't wake up early to get more done. I wake up early to remember who I am before the world tells me who I should be. That sentence rewired something in my brain, and I knew I had to test it. So I committed to 7 days of his exact morning routine. A routine he claimed was built on principles older than any business strategy, older than any self-help movement, principles that had guided emperors and slaves alike through the chaos of being human. What happened in those 7 days didn't just change my mornings. It changed the entire architecture of how I approach my life. And by the end of this, I think it might change yours too. Here's what most people get wrong about waking up early. They treat it like a productivity transaction. They think if they wake up at 5, they'll magically gain 3 extra hours to check off more tasks, to hustle harder, to grind their way into some version of success that always seems just out of reach. But that's not what the ancient Stoics understood, and that's not what this CEO understood either. The power of the early morning isn't about addition. It's about subtraction. It's about stripping away the noise before the noise even has a chance to find you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, used his mornings to write to himself, to remind himself that his power was temporary, that his body was fragile, that the only thing he truly controlled was his response to the day ahead. He wasn't writing task lists. He was calibrating his soul. And this CEO, sitting in his home office at 5:15 with nothing but a single lamp and a notebook, was doing the same thing. The first principle he taught me was this: you don't wake up early to conquer the world. You wake up early to conquer yourself. Day 1 of my challenge started the way you'd expect. The alarm at 4:50, he felt like an act of violence. My body resisted. My mind flooded with reasons why this was unnecessary, why I could start tomorrow, why successful people probably don't really do this every single day. But I remembered what he told me. The resistance you feel in that moment is the same resistance that keeps you from every hard thing worth doing. The Stoics called it the struggle between your higher self and your lower self. The part of you that seeks comfort versus the part that seeks meaning. So I got up. I didn't check my phone. That was rule 1, non-negotiable, and honestly the hardest part. Our phones are designed to hijack the morning, to pull us immediately into other people's agendas, emergencies, comparisons, and dopamine loops. The CEO explained that the first input you allow into your consciousness sets the frequency for your entire day. If that input is chaos, your day will be chaos. If that input is intentionality, your day has a chance. So instead of scrolling, I sat in silence. Just 3 minutes. He told me this was the modern equivalent of what the Stoics called morning reflection, a practice of observing your thoughts without attaching to them, of noticing the anxiety that wants to plan the day, the regret that wants to replay yesterday, the fear that wants to catastrophize tomorrow. You just sit and watch it all like weather passing through. Those 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. My brain was screaming for stimulation, for something to do, but I held the space. And then something small shifted. I noticed that beneath all the mental noise, there was a baseline of calm, a kind of stillness that was always there, just buried. The CEO called this touching the ground. He said most people spend their entire lives in their heads, spinning in narrative and reaction, never realizing there's a foundation beneath all of it. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught that we're disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of things. The morning silence isn't about emptying your mind. It's about recognizing that your mind is not you. It's a tool, and like any tool, it works better when you're the one operating it instead of the other way around. After the silence, I moved to the second part of his routine, reading philosophy. Not scrolling through quotes on Instagram. Not motivational content designed to fire you up for 30 seconds. Real reading. Dense, challenging text that requires you to think. That first morning, I read a passage from Seneca about the shortness of life, about how we act as if we have an infinite supply of time, when in reality we're squandering it on things that don't matter. Seneca wrote that people are frugal with their money, but recklessly wasteful with their time, the one resource they can never get back. Reading this at 5 in the morning in the quiet hit different. It wasn't abstract philosophy. It was a mirror. I realized how much of my life I was spending in reactive mode, letting the urgent drown out the important, letting other people's priorities dictate my energy. The CEO told me that reading philosophy in the morning is like setting an internal compass. It reminds you what direction you're actually trying to go before the world starts pulling you in 1,000 directions. It's not about becoming a philosopher. It's about becoming deliberate. And here's the thing. This isn't just woo-woo mindset work. This is strategic. Every high performer I've studied, from Ray Dalio to Tim Ferriss to Naval Ravikant, talks about the importance of first principles thinking, of going back to foundational truths instead of just copying what everyone else is doing. The Stoics were the original first principles thinkers. They asked, what is actually within my control? What is the nature of the obstacle in front of me? How do I respond in a way that aligns with my values instead of my impulses? These questions, asked every morning, become a filter for every decision you make during the day. By day 3, I started to notice the compound effect. Waking up early wasn't just giving me extra time. It was giving me a different quality of time. The decisions I made in the morning, the way I approached problems, the patience I had with interruptions, all of it was sharper, more grounded. I wasn't perfect, but I was more aware. And awareness is the first step to change. But here's where the routine shifts, and this is critical. The Stoic foundation, the silence, and the reading, that's the internal work. But it has to lead somewhere. It has to translate into action. Otherwise, you're just a philosopher in a chair, and the world doesn't change because you thought about it. This is where the CEO's routine moved from reflection to execution. And it's where most people who try morning routines fail. They either stay too long in the contemplative phase and never build momentum, or they skip it entirely and just jump into hustle mode without any grounding. The CEO's system bridges both. After the reading, he moves immediately into what he calls his power hour. This is 60 minutes of deep, uninterrupted work on the single most important project in his life at that moment. Not email. Not meetings, not admin, the thing that moves the needle, the thing that, if completed, would make everything else easier or irrelevant. This concept comes from Gary Keller's framework in The One Thing. What's the one thing you could do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? The CEO takes that question seriously. Every Sunday, he identifies his one thing for the week. Then every morning, he spends the first hour of his wakeful, focused energy on that thing and only that thing. For me, during the challenge, my one thing was finishing a creative project I'd been avoiding for months. A project that required deep thinking, not just busy work. And let me tell you, working on it at 5:30 in the morning, before the emails, before the texts, before the world woke up and started demanding pieces of me, was a completely different experience. The quality of thought was higher. The resistance was lower. There's a concept in neuroscience called hypofrontality, a state where the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-criticism and overthinking, quiets down. This is the state athletes enter during flow, the state artists enter during creation. And it's much easier to access early in the morning when your brain hasn't been bombarded by stimulus yet. The CEO understood this intuitively. He didn't need the science to tell him that his best ideas came in the early hours. He just knew that the person he was at 5 in the morning was the person he wanted making decisions, not the fragmented, reactive version of himself that existed by noon. By the end of the week, I had made more tangible progress on my project than I had in the previous 2 months combined. Not because I was working more hours overall, but because I was working the right hours on the right thing. And this is where the ancient wisdom and modern performance science align perfectly. The Stoics taught that the obstacle is the way, that resistance is information, that the hard thing is usually the right thing. But they also taught the importance of sustained effort over time, of showing up daily even when motivation fades, even when the results aren't immediate. Seneca wrote about the compounding effect of daily improvement, how small gains, invisible in the moment, become extraordinary over months and years. This is the same principle that modern entrepreneurs like James Clear preach with Atomic Habits. 1% better every day doesn't feel like much, but it compounds into a 37 times improvement over a year. The CEO's morning routine is the embodiment of this. He's not trying to have one explosive day of productivity. He's trying to have 1,000 consistent days of aligned action. And the morning is the lever that makes consistency possible. Because here's the truth about willpower and discipline that most people miss. They're finite resources that deplete throughout the day. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every frustration you manage, it all drains the tank. By the evening, you're running on fumes. That's why most people's grand plans fall apart after dinner. They're trying to execute their most important work with the weakest version of their willpower. The CEO flips this. He does the hard thing first, when his willpower is full, when his clarity is highest, when his discipline is strongest. Day 5 was when I hit the wall. I woke up exhausted. My body ached. My mind was foggy. Every part of me wanted to sleep in, to give up, to declare the experiment interesting but unsustainable. This is the moment the CEO warned me about. He said the real test of any routine isn't the first few days when novelty and motivation carry you. It's the day when you have no motivation, when your body rebels, when every logical reason to quit lines up perfectly. This is the day that separates the people who change from the people who just try. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it voluntary discomfort, the intentional embrace of hardship to build resilience. Marcus Aurelius would sleep on the floor. Seneca would practice poverty, not because they were masochists, but because they understood that strength comes from testing yourself against resistance. When I got up that 5th morning, even though everything in me resisted, I proved something to myself. I proved that I could act independently of how I felt. And that's power. That's freedom. Because if your actions are always dictated by your feelings, you're not free. You're a passenger. But if you can act in alignment with your principles, even when your feelings scream otherwise, you've unlocked a different level of agency. The CEO told me that this is the essence of self-mastery, the ability to override the immediate in service of the important. And it's not just about mornings. This skill transfers. When you prove to yourself that you can wake up early despite not wanting to, you build evidence that you can have the difficult conversation, make the uncomfortable decision, stay focused when distractions are everywhere. Each small act of discipline is a deposit in your self-trust account. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence, not the fake, performative confidence that comes from external validation, but the deep, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you keep your promises to yourself. By day 6, the routine didn't feel like a routine anymore. It felt like a ritual. There's a difference. A routine is something you do out of obligation. A ritual is something you do with intention and reverence. The CEO's morning had become sacred time, not because it was religious, but because it was protected. It was the non-negotiable foundation that everything else in his life was built on. And I started to feel that too. The morning became the time I reconnected with my purpose, the time I reminded myself what I was building and why it mattered, the time I fortified myself for whatever chaos the day would bring. The final component of his routine was physical movement, but not the way you might think. He didn't wake up and immediately go crush a workout. That came later. Instead, he did 10 minutes of what he called embodiment practice. Stretching, breath work, slow movement designed to wake up the body and integrate the mind. He explained that most people live entirely disconnected from their bodies, stuck in their heads, only noticing their physical form when it's in pain or when they're looking in the mirror. But the body holds wisdom. It knows when you're stressed before your mind admits it. It knows when something is wrong before the logic catches up. The Stoics understood the unity of mind and body. Epictetus taught that the body is not separate from the soul, that how you treat your body affects how you think and feel. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Your gut biome affects your mood. Your posture affects your confidence. Your breath affects your nervous system. The CEO's embodiment practice was his way of saying good morning to his body, of thanking it for carrying him, of preparing it for the demands ahead. I added this to my routine, and honestly, it might have been the most surprising element. Those 10 minutes of intentional movement made me feel more present, more grounded, more ready. It was the bridge between the internal work of reflection and the external work of execution. By day 7, I didn't want the challenge to end. That was the most unexpected part. I thought I'd be counting down the days, celebrating when I could sleep in again. But instead, I felt something close to grief at the thought of going back to my old pattern. Because in just 1 week, I had glimpsed a different way of being, a way where I started each day from a place of strength instead of reaction, where I made progress on what mattered instead of just responding to what was urgent, where I felt aligned with a version of myself I actually respected. The CEO told me this would happen. He said the routine doesn't feel restrictive once you experience the freedom it creates. It's not about waking up early for the sake of waking up early. It's about designing your life instead of defaulting through it. It's about choosing your inputs before the world chooses them for you. It's about creating space for the person you're trying to become to actually show up. The ancient Stoics lived in a world of chaos, violence, political instability, and uncertainty. Not that different from today, honestly. And yet they developed a philosophy and a set of practices that allowed them to maintain inner peace, clarity, and purpose regardless of external circumstances. They understood that the only thing you truly control is your response, your effort, your character. Everything else is just weather. The CEO had taken these ancient principles and translated them into a modern framework, a framework that works whether you're running companies or just trying to get your life together. And the morning is the foundation of that framework, because how you start determines how you continue. If you start reactive, you'll stay reactive. If you start intentional, you have a chance at staying intentional. If you start from a place of clarity, that clarity can carry through even when things get messy. So here's what I learned from stealing a Stoic CEO's 5 a.m. routine for 7 days. I learned that discipline isn't punishment. It's self-respect. I learned that the hard thing in the morning is almost always the thing that makes the rest of the day easier. I learned that philosophy isn't abstract academic nonsense. It's the most practical tool you have for navigating reality. I learned that small, consistent actions compound into massive results, but only if you actually do them when no one is watching, when no one would know if you quit. I learned that the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life, and the morning is when you have the most power over those thoughts. I learned that you don't need motivation to act. You need commitment and a system that makes acting easier than not acting. I learned that waking up early isn't about productivity. It's about identity. It's about deciding who you are before the world decides for you. The CEO told me something on the last day that I keep coming back to. He said most people sleepwalk through life, moving from stimulus to response, never stopping to question if this is actually the life they want to be living. The morning routine is the alarm clock, not for your body, but for your consciousness. It's the daily practice of waking up in every sense of the word, of becoming aware, of taking the reins, of remembering that you have agency even when it doesn't feel like it. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, which didn't mean living in the woods. It meant living in alignment with your highest rational self, making choices that reflect your values instead of your impulses. And that alignment has to be renewed daily because the world is constantly pulling you away from it. The noise is relentless. The distractions are infinite. The demands never stop. But the morning, those sacred first hours, that's your fortress. That's where you rebuild the foundation every single day so that when the storms come, and they will come, you have something solid to stand on. I'm not saying you have to wake up at 5 a.m. That's not the point. The point is that you need a practice, a non-negotiable anchor in your day that reconnects you with what matters before everything else crowds in. For the CEO, for me, for the Stoics, that practice happens early. But the time is less important than the intention. What matters is that you create space, protected space, where you're not reacting, not performing, not managing, just being and thinking and preparing. What matters is that you take your life seriously enough to design it instead of just endure it. What matters is that you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start building the perfect practice. Because the moment will never come. The conditions will never be ideal. There will always be a reason to wait, to procrastinate, to stay comfortable. But comfort is not where growth happens. Growth happens in the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. And the morning is the bridge across that gap. So if you take anything from this, take this. Tomorrow morning, set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual. Don't check your phone. Sit in silence for 3 minutes. Read one page of something that challenges you to think deeper. Then spend 20 minutes on the one thing that actually matters, the project, the skill, the relationship, the goal that you keep saying is important but never seem to have time for. Do this for 7 days. Not 7 weeks. Not 7 months. Just 7 days. See what happens. See who you become when you give yourself the space to become them. See what's possible when you stop waiting for motivation and start building discipline. See how different your life feels when you're the author of your mornings instead of the victim of them. The CEO didn't give me a morning routine. He gave me a framework for taking my life back. And now I'm giving it to you. The only question is whether you'll use it. The alarm is going to go off tomorrow morning regardless. The only thing you get to choose is what you do when it does. See how different your life feels when you're the author of your mornings instead of the victim of them. The CEO didn't give me a morning routine. He gave me a framework for taking my life back. And now I'm giving it to you. The only question is whether you'll use it. The alarm is going to go off tomorrow morning regardless. I challenge you to make that moment the start of your zenith. Don't just click off this video. Commit right now, in the comments below, to taking that first intentional step tomorrow. Set your anchor, build your fortress, and take your life back. The work begins when the screen goes dark. If you love contents like this, tune in by liking and subscribing to our channel for everyday contents. Don't miss out on tomorrow's section called the Productivity and Deep Work. Let us know in the comments section your thoughts and where you're watching from.